Okay, welcome to our third video when we're looking at money. This time we're looking at the demand for money and the interest rate equilibrium. And just to point out, the demand for money isn't actually the concept of physically needing more cash in our pockets when we go out during the evening. So the demand for money, it actually refers to the desire to hold and not spend immediately money. So if you think about your wages, you may actually spend some, and there might be some you keep in the bank. It might be you keep some because you've got a bill coming up later. And it's also perhaps a form of saving. So most people would like to try and save something for a rainy day, or because you know you've got a bill coming up soon and you won't be able to afford it otherwise. So this money stays in the bank. If we were to consider the determinants of demand for money, we could think first of all about rising income levels. So as money rises, as income rises, there's more money available to you. And perhaps if we go back to the income elasticity of demand, we will be actually purchasing more normal rather than inferior goods. Remember that in the positive income elasticity of demand, YED? Perhaps we are more likely to save some money for holidays and for cars, and what it does, it creates a demand for money. There can also be a fear that other securities, perhaps shares, investments, are too risky. And we do look at ways of locking up some of our money, perhaps some ways we can invest in different ways. And I think it's fair to say that some investments are much riskier than others. So the assumption is that you make a rational decision and you choose and you assess risk and reward. So at the moment there's a very, very low interest in bank savings, but your money is safe. So if you don't want risk and you're prepared to accept very low interest, this is the best thing for you to do. But there is potentially much more available to you in terms of shares and investments, in terms of the interest, but of course the investment is much riskier, and in the short term you could lose money. But the expectation or your expected reward is much greater. So if we think it's too risky, then we move our cash deposits to the bank, creating a more demand for cash. So perhaps the fear of risk creates demand for money. And if the interest rates are simply a price for money. So the demand for money behaves in a supply and demand mode, as in the microeconomics. It's that same inverse relationship. So if the price of interest rises, our demand falls. And if the price of interest reduces, then actually we have this larger demand. If we think about the interest rate equilibrium, an equilibrium price for money, the price for money being the same as the demand for money, exactly the same concept as thinking things through in microeconomics. So when the interest rates reach the rate equilibrium, when the supply of money reaches the money, and it equals this demand for money. So if the rate of interest is greater than the interest rate equilibrium, we have an excess of money is invested into non-cash investments, and this has the effect of driving down the interest rates or the cost to the borrower. And if the rate of interest is lower than the rate equilibrium, then investments are sold to liberate cash. It's simply seeing the price mechanism in action. If we look here at the interest rate equilibrium, we can see the vertical curve is the money supply, and you can see it's largely fixed at a given point of time, not actually affected by the interest rate, but by other things, but not the interest rate. The demand for money is affected by the interest rate. So it's the same microeconomic principle as supply and demand. And when the interest rates are temporarily out of step, the price mechanism steps in as per microeconomics. If we were to think about the effects of increasing the money supply, if the money supply is increased, then the money supply curve shifts to the right. It causes a reduction in interest rates, and there's an increase in investment and spending, and the extent of the reduction depends or is determined on the steepness of the elasticity of this money demand curve. So the shift of money moves to the right, and the equilibrium rate is therefore lower. So we've looked at 3 videos now. The first one explored the idea of money, the second looked at the demand for money, and on this video here, when we're actually looking at the supply of money, and we've seen that the interest operates as a price for borrowing or for having money, and the price is charged by a person who has the money to a person who wants to borrow the money. And in the next video we're actually going to look at the concept of inflation.